My name's Winston Poyton. I am Chief Product and Technology Officer here at Zellis. I'll give people a second to put their ears on. Is everyone going like this? Reminds me of my kids' silent discos, which was like a terrifying event. So I'm Winston. I am Chief Product and Technology Officer here at Zellis. And I have, over the last 10 years, been involved in kind of various things to do with AI and automation and transformation of the way we work. And the way education works, if you kind of look up my background. We're going to talk to you a bit about kind of how we see AI evolving and how we see things changing in the particularly HR landscape over the next few years, and kind of really bring to life into what we think that might look like and what we think that might have as an impact on the workforce. But first of all, I'm going to introduce Steve.
So hello everyone, my name's Steve Elcock. I am the Director of Product AI at Zellis, so fantastic to see you all, and I'm sure everyone's on a slightly different stage of their sort of AI journey today. Some of you perhaps coming to it with a little bit of suspicion, some of it very excited, and it's really difficult in this crazy sort of environment of AI, staying balanced and kind of giving us real structure about what we should do as HR practitioners in this sort of evolving AI sort of environment that's around us. I mean, it's certainly an amazing time to be alive. Don't think I've experienced in the last 2 or 3 years. My background, by the way, is in neuroscience. So I studied neuroscience at university. I had no use for it at all in all my career doing HR and payroll systems. And of course, in the last 2 or 3 years, it might have been sort of slightly useful again. But it is only 3 years ago since ChatGPT came out, and I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves, it's so much has happened in the last 3 years. So we're going to hopefully give you a little bit of a journey about some practical things to take away, some depth. There's so much hype going around in the market about AI. What we'd like to do today is take you on this sort of bit of a journey over the next 30 minutes about how you can practically use sort of AI to your advantage, and this title of being the carpenter and not the nail. Slightly intriguing title, but I have the opportunity to speak to quite a few sort of interesting people in events like this, and also journalists, as I talk about sort of AI in general in the HR and payroll marketplace. And there's a great chap called Oliver Pickup, who I recently spoke to, and we were sort of riffing around, what's going on in the market, isn't it sort of mad? There's lots going on. How do we stay ahead, and how do we stay in control of this very, all-consuming technology that's coming at us from all sides? On a consumer side, in businesses, we're having private equity firms and owners sort of saying, you've got to make AI happen, just make it happen. Here's a big stick, here's Copilot, just go and do it. How do you actually get to a place of control of this whole environment, not just of the technology itself, but also of the kind of organizational structure that needs to be there to receive it in that transformation process. So Oliver Pickup, a really good guy, suggests if you've not seen his stuff, he thinks very differently. He doesn't come up with sort of AI slop. He thinks very deeply about the subject, and I really enjoyed the time with him. So how are we going to, as practitioners, think about being the carpenter, not the nail? How do we have the control over this very interesting technology that's before us and is helping us to sort of change our workplaces? So in the last month, I mean, it's so hard because on the one hand, you sort of think, okay, I can control this thing, but there's so much happening that's outside of our control. Humans, we sort of need control. There's certain things I guess we can't control, like when we're going to die and taxes and all those sorts of things. Maybe we have to find philosophy to help us control those. But the technology of AI, is changing so fast, we can feel completely out of control. And there's a few things I just wanted to draw to your attention you're probably aware of. But in the last month, I mean, so much has happened. There are 8 frontier models released in the first week of April. Frontier models are things like Anthropic, Microsoft, all the big providers basically, DeepSeek. Some of the Chinese people are bringing out really powerful models now as well. So Opus 4.7 is the nerfed version. So for the first time in sort of AI recent history, the providers didn't give us the most powerful model. They said, right, this most powerful one is too powerful to release. I mean, that's quite a scary kind of step change, I think, for how this was going. So they're holding Mythos back. There's a special program called Glasswing, and we hope that this will be released in a very governed way, where we're not all suddenly in jeopardy because Mythos has found lots of vulnerabilities in software. I just find this really fascinating. It's all jumped again in very recent weeks. The whole kind of technology change of AI, and it's really important that we stay ahead of it. Just a couple of other things to mention. Chinese models. So China is really like stepping up. They constitute about 50% of the world's AI researchers these days. DeepSeek version 4 was released. It's a 1 trillion parameter model. It's massive. It's as good as ChatGPT 5. I mean, last week, OpenAI released another model, ChatGPT 5.5. It's just incredible, the pace of this stuff. And also there's this thing called OpenClaw. And if you haven't read about OpenClaw, I suggest you have a look at it. It's definitely not for corporate consumption. It's a personal thing, and it's where you can let the AI have full control over your laptop and effectively your life, and it is extremely dangerous. So don't, for goodness sake, don't go in there and say, I saw this guy and he said I should play with OpenClaw. That's not what I'm saying. But it's good to be aware of, and there are people doing crazy things with OpenClaw. Like they're saying, look, go and make me some money on the internet, and the OpenClaw is saying, I'm going to rent a human to help me make some money on the internet. So the world is becoming quite strange, and this technology is something we have to be ahead of, we have to understand, and we have to control. And that's what this talk is all about today, being the carpenter, not the nail. So that's the recent history. I'm going to hand back to Winston because there's a backdrop here, not just of the last month, but over the last few years, 3 years particularly, there's been significant change. And Winston, in his role, has seen a number of things, through product evolution in HR and payroll as well. So I'm just going to hand back briefly to Winston, and then we'll talk some more about how to stay in control of this technology.
So you will all have seen kind of LLMs, and came out kind of 2-3 years ago. We started talking about them. As we sort of built through that intelligence, we started looking at RAG models, where actually give it a bunch of things like documentation and get it to do kind of human answers against those. That sort of started to transform how I provide knowledge across the business, how do I share information, how do I give people kind of real-time answers to questions that are maybe buried within your organization. Then we started to have agents that to sort of pull through, actually, give me something that's a bit more specific about me rather than some generic answer. And then we start talking about agentic AI and what that might look like. Steve and I spend a lot of time talking about use cases. You'll go around the show today and see a whole bunch of, I've got 150 use cases or 300 use cases or one of those things. Agentic AI is changing the way we think about that, and actually moving us from, on the left-hand side, the monolith approach, where you have an agent that goes away and tries and finds the answers to you and does everything in a kind of sequential way, through to an orchestrated system. We nearly stuck an actual orchestra on the picture because my background is a professional musician and spent a lot of time. If you are in charge of an organization or in charge of an orchestra, it's not just about what one person is doing, it's about what everybody is doing. And you start rolling up the use cases that we've talked about and into, okay, what does that look like as a process flow? And now, as a result of that, does my process flow need to change? So as we get into the talk, we need to sort of change the way that we're working. It's no longer as it was 2 years ago when you're going, okay, how can AI help me do what I'm doing today? It's now, how can AI help me rewrite my process and change my process and actually stop doing what I'm doing today to do it in a different way. And I've got examples in kind of our world where we've gone, okay, somebody's left the organization. Before we rehire, should we look at how much of that job we can automate in order to move it into that agentic space, and actually then use the money in a different way, and use the money in order to innovate further in our product set or fix a different problem that we currently can't solve. So having the ability to drive agentic AI is giving us the ability to review not just what we do and how we do it, but the way we actually approach work in the first place. And this is why Steve quite rightly says it's exhausting, right? Are we the hammer, or are we the nail, or are we the carpenter? Which one are we going to be in this process? The tools are changing so fast that if we just worry about what the tooling's doing, by tomorrow someone's coming and saying, don't use that anymore, this one's miles better. And you're forever in this loop of what you do next. Whereas if you think about the way you want to work and why you're doing what you're doing, and then just evolve the tooling that sits underneath it, you will have a much calmer approach to AI adoption and probably remain sane, but also you'll be able to leverage that to really get ahead. So we're going to talk about three things. One, we're going to talk about AI and why it might be a bit more human, more human than you think. We're going to talk about frameworks and some things that you can use to really help you get through the process of how do you deal with all of the noise. And then we're going to finish with a little bit of what does that mean for education within your teams and within your organizations to really push this forward. So over to you, Steve.
So yeah, section one, I guess, Winston touched on a few things there about control and how we can be kind of leveling up our thinking, not just here's Copilot, make AI happen, but what's the framework, what's the thinking process behind that, how do we make AI happen? It's kind of thinking in a more leveled up kind of way. That's a really key theme of this talk. And I just wanted to start with, AI, I mean, you'll see it everywhere, firing in at you, even from us now. AI, there's so much marketing hype and hyperbole about AI, and it's exhausting, and in some ways it can get boring, and then you suddenly hear new things and you get very excited. And I think it's quite important just to step back a second and think, well, where did this whole thing come from? So, Alan Turing, 1950, can computers think? He came up with this sort of idea of saying there might be a way in which we can get computers to think one day, and that was years and years and years ago. So, 70 years ago, that initial kind of brilliant minds came up with this sort of concept of AI, and then, they sort of made this thing called a perceptron. Guy called Frank Rosenblatt, 1957. He says, this is how I might model a neuron in our brain. And sometimes I think we go drifting along with all technology, and we somehow lose track of the fact that this is very different, actually, to normal technology. The way they teach AI at university, and I know this firsthand because my stepson's been doing it, they don't start with IT, they don't start with technology, they start with neuroscience, philosophy, maths. And there's as much focus on the neuroscience, philosophy, and maths as there is on the technology and the IT afterwards. And you almost need that grounding, I think, to really sort of understand the technology, keep on top of it, keep in control of it. So just for a second, just indulge me on the brain, because it's a subject I love. I just think it's one of the great mysteries of the universe. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, and in here somehow, I've got this tofu substance that kind of puts my world together. I don't have all the knowledge that I've learned sort of in books or in funny little kind of files in a file system. I have them in weights between neurons in my brain, and it runs on 20 watts of power, like a ridiculously low light bulb. And it somehow holds my whole conscious experience. This is an incredible thing, and this was the muse by which the early scientists in AI, they really, they took on the early days of how AI should work. And we sometimes forget that. We get it so into the technology that we don't realize that ultimately this is very human. It was geared in a human way of thinking. And even the sizes of the models are starting to become on parity, and we're good at different things to AI, but the Mythos is rumored to have 10 trillion parameters. So we've got like 100 trillion synapses in our brain, 86 billion neurons. It's just incredible. And actually, OpenClaw, one of its kind of key features is it sleeps, which I find quite cool. Like, one of the theories of sleeping is that we kind of reprocess old memories and try and bring them together into more short-term memory. And it's interesting that AI, the steps and step changes in AI seem to be where we're more closely modeling the brain. At least that's my perception of it. The other interesting thing is System 1 versus System 2. So there's a guy called Daniel Kahneman. Some of you might have read a popular book, Penguin book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it basically says, as a human, there's probably kind of, it's very, very, broadly put, there's two ways in which we think of things. We have this reactive thought, 2 + 2 = 4. I can knee-jerk reflex to something, and that's very sort of easy and natural to me, and it's all kind of almost hardwired in my brain. And there's this slow, almost lazy thought, but far more elaborate and more detailed, sort of deep thinking. And what we're finding with agentic AI is that we've moved from LLMs just regurgitating sort of System 1 style, what's my name, blah, 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 and out it comes with text, to, okay, I'm actually not going to necessarily give the user an answer in like 5 seconds. Like, everyone used to say non-functional requirements, HR systems, I must see a response in 5 seconds. You're actually more into the quality of the response. And if it takes 3 minutes or half an hour to come up with something really good quality, that's better than having a 5-second word salad response. So System 2 is a key sort of component of agentic AI. And guess what? It's part of the way we're wired as humans in our brain. So thinking about these human aspects of AI, I think really helps us take control of it. We don't often think, because we're so busy, about how we think. So, it's human in its origination, AI. As I said, the perceptron was this thing, and various iterations of AI, winters and summers have happened, and there's this massive progress in the last 3 years. It's human in the way it's very massively parallel, the way that parameters work. It activates weighted connections. It can condense massive amounts of information into effectively small binary files, which are numbers, a bit like our brain. It's human in the way it learns. It's slightly different in the way it learns because it does this thing called backpropagation, which we don't really do. We feed forward in the way we learn, and no one's cracked that yet. Not even Jeff Hinton, who's one of the godfathers of AI. He spent 10 years trying to work out to make AI models learn like humans. So that's one bit where it's very slightly different. But we do learn, and the whole concept of learning and reinforcement learning is really, really key and at the heart of AI in general. We think in abstract layers, so we level up. We want to know all the time how to do things and why, and these complex questions, not just the ground truth, but we sort of think in terms of abstract layers. And I'm going to bring that to life with an example in a minute. AI understands the gist of things. With the transformer architecture, which is the modern AI basis of all of the systems we're now using, the key difference was that it can get gist because it can go back far further in the history of what's called a context window of lots of things that light up in this thing called an attention mechanism, which again is very much like the brain, and can take autonomous agentic actions as well. So it's much more human than we think. We think this is technology, and actually an awful lot of this is modeled deeply in neuroscience. And again, just to bring that to life, when I see you here, or I look at a bird, I mean, there's a bird down there. It doesn't look like a bird, but it is a bird. It falls on my retina, gets inverted. The first few layers of it are all about the kind of pixels and the color. The next layer goes, oh, there's 2 lines that intersect, and that is a feature that this next layer learns. The next layer goes, oh, there's 2 lines and a head, and that might be a head. And so all the time you're abstracting up. And so the question is, Steve, all this sounds wonderful, but how does it actually relate to anything that I'm doing in my day-to-day life as an HR payroll practitioner? It does, and I promise you it does, because what we're looking at in our world, and particularly making use and controlling this technology and being the carpenter, is how do we level up? How do we get away from doing the monotonous, boring, transactional stuff into, okay, I can use AI to take that away from me. Okay, I can exist in sort of higher planes, if you like, of reasoning. I like to call this kind of ascendant thinking. We've got to sort of like set our sights up with this so that we can control it, so that we can be the carpenter and not the nail. So more and more things are moving towards agentic and cognitive systems. There's a new trend called neurosymbolic AI, and that's even more like the brain. There's new models coming out that are even more like the brain. There's something called Mamba and something called Jepper, and they're brand new technologies that are going to take AI on again over the next few years. So in short, I sort of commend to you from this little first section that AI is far more human than you think. Don't be overawed by it. Think about the marvel and the wonder of how you are created and how you can think on these high levels, and that might help you feel differently about AI. Like, maybe there are ways you can control it. Maybe you can bring it under your command and your control, not just, oh dear, I've got Copilot, I'm being told what to do, and how do I make use of this technology? Think about it from a sort of top-down, ascendant way, and be the carpenter. But AI also needs frameworks, and I'm going to hand back to Winston to talk us through this section.
Thanks, Steve. So, applying that to an organization, we have the same challenges in Zellis, and it will have the same challenges that will exist across organizations. AI, as Steve says, can create structure from unstructured data, but the more you give it as a prompt, you will have all found this. You give it a rubbish prompt, it gives you a rubbish answer. You give it a better prompt, still gives you a rubbish answer. You have to give it a really good prompt in order for it to do the thing that you actually want it to do. And so this AI is not an excuse for not thinking yourselves and for passing the responsibility of thinking to an AI kind of tool. You actually have to think more deeply because you have to actually know what you want before you ask it, whereas as humans, we're used to iterating a bit and evolving and kind of evolving an idea. You need to do a lot of that thinking up front. So how can you do it? So people, process, technology, we've talked about those as a triangle for many, many years. People, process, and systems, it's the same thing, right? How do we adapt the system to what we're doing? If we roll back to pre-automation, everything was a manual process. Technology came along, we started thinking about, okay, how do I automate that? How do I take time out of the process we've got today? With AI, you'll hear loads of examples of now I can do that instantly. I don't need to do it anymore. And it comes back to that point that Steve and I have talked about in really thinking about what is your organizational design? What is your organizational kind of process map? What are the things that you want to be known to be brilliant for? And what are the things you just want to happen in the background? Get rid of the things you want to just happen in the background, focus on the things that you want to be known for and work out how you get those things done. Steve and I both run product and technology organizations. We have engineers writing code, using AI to write code, using AI to write code to fix the code that AI is writing code, but we still always have a human that checks everything that we're doing before it goes out. Because I'm sure none of you would appreciate me saying, sorry, we got your payroll wrong, but an AI did it, not my fault. You probably wouldn't accept that as an answer. So we still, where we know we need to have a human that has the depth and breadth and knowledge and knows what right and wrong is in the concept of you, our customers, we know that we need to kind of build that into our process. So think deeply about your organizational design, think deeply about the processes you want, think deeply where you are prepared to accept risk and where you are not prepared to accept risk. So we did this little map, which I'm sure you can get hold of from us afterwards, around, okay, for what we see as HR and payroll businesses, or parts of in the HCM part of the business, where do you think you can make actually the highest impact on AI opportunity, and where is there probably low value because the technology is either not there yet, or you would probably not want to kind of push that out as a risk. This is the type of thing you should be doing for your organization. We have some work going on at the moment to allow my internal teams to really understand our products better. We are building a RAG model to pull all of our documentation together to share that with all of our internal teams. There's two benefits for that. One, the knowledge of what our products do gets much broader across the business, which means our support team are much more effective, which means you get the right answers first time. It also means in me in product and technology, I get asked less questions. And so I get more of my time back. So there's a win-win, right? NPS goes up from you, I get more time back. What do I do with that time? Stick it into product innovation, and the kind of cycle creates it. We've spent quite a bit of time thinking about which one of these boxes are we going to focus on first? Which ones are the things that are going to actually make a difference? And how we build that in the product is pulling it all together to say, well, actually, at the bottom, you've got all of your data. We then talked about these use cases at the beginning, which is the individual tasks that we can train an AI kind of to do and to run for us. But that needs pulling together into a set of processes that you can manage and control that are fit for your organization, and then you want it to run autonomously. There might be a set of checks that you want to do on a recruitment process. Somebody's just looking at it manually and checking it's going through. You don't really want to do that anymore. You want to make sure that all of those boxes have been ticked, and all you want to know is that they have all been ticked and that they have all been verified. You don't want to know the 20 steps that happened in between, so why not get an agent to do that? Why not push it through? You might want something around how your employees grow and their development. Have they really done all of their learning materials? Have they really kind of progressed? Are they really using AI? When they say they're using AI, is it because they've asked what the weather is this weekend for the barbecue? It's rubbish, by the way, if you've not checked the weather for the weekend. But it might not be useful activities. So actually, write an agent that says, I don't just want to know that they are using it, I want to know what value we're getting from it and how does that pull through. So think about, in the framework of what you build for your organization, think about it from the very top, in the same way that you would have done pre-AI. If you were saying, I want to grow my business, who do I need to be able to do that? You would have sat down and gone, well, I need this type of person, I need this type of person. Saw a brilliant example the other day where one company had started adding their AI agents to their organization chart. So actually, they saw them as another employee and so they can actually see where they had work effort going on, not just a shrinking workforce, but an expanding capability for their organization. That was a cute way of actually bringing to life the impact that it was having in their world. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah, and I think that last point about agents in your org structure is a really interesting and important way of thinking about the new world. So we're on the home run, which is the third stage of this. We've looked at the human sort of aspects of AI and how it's more human than we think, and how, if we think about it in the right way in terms of levels and structure and framework, the AI is going to operate more effectively. And those frameworks are really important to think about. Like, your brain has a certain amount of structure. It has sort of centers for doing certain things, auditory, visual, sort of elaboration of thought, but it also thinks in layers. And then the last piece then is how do we sort of bring all this together in a sort of education way, and how do we level up our workforce to make use of the technology? The agents idea I love, because almost you can give your agents skills and capabilities, a bit like you do with job descriptions of people, and that's probably a really helpful and important way to think about making use of agentic AI. So if I'm going to make something that sets something up, checks my email every day, looks for spam, whatever, I can give it skills. It might start as basic as that, check out spam. I know Outlook sort of does that for you already, but there may be certain keywords or things you can ask an AI to do for you to redirect or deflect certain tasks or emails. A couple of other things I wanted to say on education. We need to have a kind of a joy of learning things at those higher levels. And that's sort of the skills and capabilities piece. How do we learn ourselves about how AI operates, and how do we put in place the skills and capabilities we want other people in the organization to learn, and how we want our agents to have as well, so that we've coached the agent in doing something autonomously for me, so I can level up and be ascendant and in control with the hammer again. And there's two particular areas I just wanted to call out, which I think are going to be quite important in the next couple of years. So one of them is around reflective AI. So there's going to be more and more scrutiny about control and human in the loop. To Winston's point, it's so easy to vibe code, things now. At some point, there's going to be some problems where this gets found out. There'll be governance, there'll be legislation, there'll be ISO, whatever's. So thinking ahead of that and reflecting and scrutinizing AI outputs, I think, is a very good way of staying in control and staying ahead of what I think is going to be a very important future trend. People who adversarially check what AI is doing and actually coach it and help it, almost like sense checking the AI all the time. That's going to be a really key role in the organization, and one way in which you stay ahead is the carpenter. And the other thing is reflexive. So at the moment, we're all sort of drunk on this very easy token consumption world. VCs and private equity firms are throwing money at AI for us to consume it, and it's really cheap. And that will change in the next 2 or 3 years. OpenAI, for example, is running at a loss. Everything it goes back. It can't go on forever. This sort of honeymoon period, or there's going to be some hangover at some point. And I think if we can get ahead of that and think, well, where are the things where I don't need to call out to a frontier model because I can do something simpler with, say, a local model, or it's like a reflex action. If I hit my knee, my leg goes, and it's become quite system one and easy for me to respond to, whereas riding a bike takes a bit of a while to take me from what is system two to system one, to become very natural. How do we make AI think that way? How do we take away some of the things where we don't have to spend loads of money on big expensive models, and how can we get immediate kind of like responses and reflex actions back? So 2 key areas, I think, just practical things to take away, and reflect on for yourselves about how do I introduce those concepts into the sort of AI picture of my organization. And in general, look, there's loads. Do come and talk to us on the stand about AI. It's a huge passion of mine, if you haven't noticed. I think there's kind of 3 levels. You've got the theory of it, which I love, but also the practice and the applied sort of agentic features of it all are really, really important. And stay ahead of it, have a joy of learning, and try and kind of create those skills and capabilities that you can push out to your workforce. And even think about those frameworks for your AI agents that you're setting up. I could talk about that forever, but we're sort of running low on time. So let's get to the takeaways. I hope today this has been useful and practical and given you something a little bit more of depth and authority. There's so much AI word salad out there. We wanted to frame it in the way that agentic AI is scary and you can feel out of control. But you can stay in control by being ahead and having the right attitude towards it and the right thought process around it. Remember, it's more human than you think. So it is based on human, sort of like the muse is the brain. So you have to think of it like a brain. How does my brain work? If I know how my brain works, I can sort of think about how I can maybe direct AI to work the way I want it to, not it to control me.
Remember, it's frameworks, right? Don't skip the step that you would normally have done pre-AI. You need to go back and do that. You need to treat your agents like they were a member of staff, right? They need training, they need teaching, they need boundaries, they need guidelines, they need progression criteria, all of those good things that come with it. Don't try and do it all at once, right? Pick where you're going to get the most value from it, and constantly review where you are and what you need to do.
And finally, just stay ahead. It's with us. In some ways, it's a magnificent time to be alive. In other ways, it's a very scary time to be alive. Let's not be ostriches in the sand, particularly in the HR world, where there are people who rely on us to create the organisational culture and structure, to really thrive in our workplaces. It's key that we are ahead of this and we're not being controlled by it. So educate yourself. Come and speak to people who are enthusiastic about it. There's all sorts of online resources. Stanford University do great stuff. Harvard, there's lots of free educational content that's really, really good and really powerful. And finally, come and have a word on the stand. We're just there. There's a Zellis stand. We'd love to talk to you more about your AI journeys. And my time is up, so I just wanted to say thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully it's been useful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really interesting. You talked a lot about skills assessment. I guess I'm more interested in, how you find the balance between using psychometrics as well. So,
great question.
Cognitive ability, personality, motivation. Like, how do you find that balance?
Great question. Sorry, I didn't hear the last bit of the. Oh, psychometric testing.
Yeah, psychometric testing across the board. Like, how do you find that balance between that and skills assessment as well?
Yeah, so we do use psychometric tools for all of our hires, all the way from apprentices all the way to board level appointments. And we use a standard approach. Obviously, each of the different outputs will be different depending on the role. But we actually use, for example, a personality test, a psychometric test. And that would then show the different areas of that individual and where they score on the 15 different points. For example, teamwork, resilience, and so on. And then we use AI and we use the report to highlight areas that we might want to probe for in interview. Yeah. So actually the report and AI gives us kind of prompts to dig a bit deeper into that individual. So we would use psychometric testing for all of our hires. And then that can show outputs that we might want to probe on a bit further.
Great, thank you.
Is that something you use within your organisation?
Yeah, we do, absolutely. And again, it's similar to the answer, I suppose. Yeah. It's where you're using them in the stage of assessment and how you're using them, depending on the role. But yeah, it's just about finding that balance. It is. Yeah, it is one data point. So what I would say is we don't use it and then discount somebody because, again, psychometric testing isn't for everyone, and we do have different adjustments to ensure we have an inclusive hiring process. So it is one data point, and at times, again, it might not suit everybody, so we wouldn't use it. If somebody had a real strong issue, then we would, find other ways of assessing that individual. So we do have it as a tool. It is a data point. But it's really great for hiring managers as well. So particularly for new managers or managers that haven't interviewed that much and therefore, need that support. So we actually go, okay, so we can give you some guidance on how you wish to interview, what questions to ask. So yeah, we find it a really great tool. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, I also actually have a question for you guys. Again, a little bit of audience participation is whether you find that your managers are resistant and to maybe changing their way of hiring. Again, a show of hands if you think that we're so used to CVs and using credentials as a way of assessing capability. Is that something here in the audience that you are seeing as well, just by a show of hands? Yeah. I think it's very, very common. Assessment centres, again, it's not a new thing. That's something that's been around for a while, but I think typically has been probably something only used for either very senior roles or for roles where absolutely it requires that those behaviours and personality, for example, if it was a sales role or a customer-facing role. And I think what we're seeing now is using that capability and using those types of assessments, whether it's a video interview or it's in person now across all different roles. Rich, I think from the perspective of your clients who are smaller businesses, how are they finding it, and how are they moving away from this sort of credential-based approach? Because they will not have the people to go away and do lots of assessment centres, which can be kind of time-consuming and expensive.
And I think, like touching on your point you've just said, a lot of the managers will see it as like, oh no, another step in the process, we're going to lose more people. But I think if you frame it as, risk protection almost, because it's going to be much harder to exit people, with the new legislation. So we need to be smarter at the start of the process. So it's just about getting it right, I think, at the start of the process. And like you say, it doesn't need to be a big assessment centre with, fully manned in a conference centre or anything like that. It could just literally be. And do you find the smaller clients, because they're more agile and they can make quicker decisions, that they can just have something quick on the web or quickly, as a video record or something like that. But I would definitely encourage it to be centred around the role, the requirements of the role, and just just test it, pilot it, different departments, different roles. That's the way that we're approaching it.
And centre on skills rather than credentials.
Yeah, definitely.
And things like assessment centres can also be done online. So in COVID, I'm sure you all remember that very well. We were still hiring, so we did have to find different ways of still assessing individuals without actually meeting them. So if you are a smaller business and you don't have necessarily everybody in the same place that frequently, then something online is also an option as well that we've used and tested. And certainly in the early days of using assessment centres, I did get a lot of pushback because it isn't going to happen overnight, but over time you can actually be more efficient and be really effective. And there may be a delay of a week or two, but I think, as Rich mentioned, having that conversation around the risk around making the wrong hire or making a bad decision, and it doesn't mean that the candidate is a bad candidate, it just means they're not right for your business and that we're not right for them. So I think having that, but also using data, which I do love, and using use cases where it has worked previously, and being able to show, there's lots of articles online where you're able to demonstrate that actually from a cost perspective, they are really beneficial and it will help long term. So just having that, being armed with that information, if you do work in talent, to be able to share with your hiring managers is really great as well.
Thank you. Okay, we've just got a few minutes left, so I'm just going to wrap up. So I think what we've heard, so first of all, Nat and Rich, thank you very much for sharing your experiences, both you, Nat, as our head of talent, and Rich, who's out there every day talking to hiring managers in many, many different organizations. And I think I'll just kind of summarize what I think we've heard today, which is, AI has genuinely broken traditional screening using credentials. I think we're all very aware of that. And as I said, the stakes have got higher now because of the Employment Right Acts and the fact that it would be very costly to you as a business to get the decision wrong. So those two things together have meant that we need to change. We do need to be adaptable and more creative about how we assess someone's skills, someone's behaviour, someone's expertise in line with the role, rather than using that sort of traditional CV or just simple interviewing method. And I think what I've definitely heard from you both is front loading really pays off. So
absolutely.
Put the time up front to get the job description right, to get the criteria for the skills you need right at the start, and then following that, making sure then that using different data points and different ways of assessing skills, personality and behaviour are used at the front end before making those decisions. I think then putting that energy and effort in up front then obviously saves that time downstream. And as we all know, again, today, I think if I'd asked you now 5 years ago what the biggest challenge for Iris was, you'd have said attracting and retaining great talent, and I don't think it's changed, has it? And Iris is not unique. I think all businesses out there face that same problem. So certainly we want to get that right at the start. So I hope you have found the tips and information useful today. If you would like to talk to us any further, Rich and Nat are here for the afternoon, and we are just over that way. on the Irish stand, and we'd be very happy to talk to you or go through any challenges you've got and share what we've done to address those. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you. Cheers.